I was made aware that there may be someone in the that is joining us tonight that has something to say from the floor. If you do, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll move on to board member questions. Seeing no one from the floor, I'm happy to open up the floor to questions from board members. If you'd like to ask, please raise your hand and I'll call. Thank you very much. The first question will be from Gregory Alvarez, board member.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for the presentation this evening. I just had one question. Looking at the photos that were part of your submission materials, I was looking at view 2 and 3, showing that neighbor to the southerly side, and sort of the expansion that's going to happen in that direction. I understand it is a permitted side yard expansion there. We would comply with the zoning resolution. The question, though, is existing. There are quite a few windows on that side, and it's a little bit different because that faces over towards Avenue O, so it's clearly a different orientation. And then also there seems to be a bay window that comes out on the first floor there, so it looks like the distance will be actually pretty short. So I don't know if there was any affirmative reaction from that particular property owner as to the changes, because it looks like, if anyone, that neighbor may be most affected. So if you have any input on that, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Not a problem. What I can tell you is that their yard, according to the plans, is a 3.6-foot yard. We are proposing an 8-foot yard. So that's about 11.5 feet between the houses. Now, I do admit the bay window goes into that 11.5 feet, so I don't want to misspeak to you. I don't have a dimension from the edge of their bay window to their property line, but I can see they do have a little bit of distance. I would guesstimate scaling it probably about 1.5 feet. So they're going to have from their bay window to our building at least 9 feet, which is significant space given the fact that we are sitting in the middle of Brooklyn in a very busy area. And as far as whether we've heard from the neighbor, I have not heard from the neighbor. I cannot speak to whether your board has.
Okay, but they were obviously on the radius.
Oh, of course. Of course they were notified.
Okay. All right.
We don't selectively take people off the list, I promise.
Okay. So then the other just second question, I didn't hear it in your presentation, but typically the garage is removed with the expansion to the rear yard.
I'm sorry, you're going out. Can you repeat so I can hear you?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Is that better? Just trying.
It's a little low, but we'll listen. We'll listen closely.
Okay, sorry. I do tend to go in and out here. Question about the removal of the garage. I imagine that's pretty standard in these sorts of applications. Is that occurring here for the expansion into the rear yard? And then secondly, where's the parking space that's referenced in the zoning analysis?
You're so absolutely right. The garage is going to be removed and replaced with a parking pad in the same location.
Parking pad in the same location, so
they're just going to park the car in the back without having a garage around it.
I see. So the idea is that the driveway will continue to exist then?
Driveway will continue to exist. Now, whether they choose to take the car all the way to the back when they park their car, that's a choice, and it obviously would be as of right whether they stop adjacent to the building or they drive all the way to the back. Either would be acceptable under the zoning.
Okay. Yep. No, understood. All right. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions from board members? All right, seeing none.
Motion to approve.
Hold on, let me just put the question out. Do I have a motion from the floor regarding a recommendation for the special permit application made to enlarge a single family resident at 1492 East 24th Street?
Madam Chair, Barton, I believe, has his hand up and he has a question.
That's all right. Just quickly, Lyra, can you show me where I go in the documents to find a picture of the current facade and a picture of the proposed facade?
Well, to see the current facade,
scrambling going through, so go ahead.
There are a couple places you can go. To see the current facade, you could, of course, go to the photographs.
Okay, right, I saw that. But I was wondering if there's just one shot that shows the existing conditions and the proposed conditions?
No, if you look in there, you will see that there are 7 shots of the block, and the building is shown in 5 of them.
No, I saw that. I'm saying, and the proposed, there isn't just one shot that shows the
In the
existing.
proposed, what you would see, if you open the proposed plans,
Okay.
you will see a couple of
Proposed,
different shots I
proposed
can show you.
conditions.
Number 1, if you look at the page that's labeled 3, it's A001, which is the 3rd page of the plans.
Got it.
You will see the streetscape,
Right.
and you can see it says proposed 1492 East 24th, just to give you an image. You can also see that there is an axonometric above that, which I think is the best view, probably better than the elevations. Do you see that?
I mean, where it says sky exposure plane on the right?
It says, it's right above, do you see the streetscape on that page?
Yeah.
Not the one that says sky exposure plane. I don't
The one
care
to
for
the
that
left.
image as much because it doesn't show you windows. It doesn't give you a real visual of what it's going to look like.
Okay, so the
Personally,
left.
I prefer the one to the left, but
Gotcha.
they're both
Okay.
accurate. I just think even though the one from the back is a little bit of an odd angle, I personally prefer it. But
Okay,
personal
so that's my best shot of what's proposed.
well, I think the best shot is the combination of the streetscape and the
Okay.
axonometric, because the streetscape shows you what you're going to see from the front. The axonometric just kind of gives you a volume of the whole building.
Okay. And the difference in height between the existing and proposed is what?
The proposed is 38.16. The existing is 31.87.
Okay, so 7-foot difference or so. Okay. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions from board members before we move to a motion? All righty, seeing again, I'll read it once more. Do I have a motion from the floor regarding a recommendation for the special permit application made to enlarge a single-family residence at 1492 East 24th Street?
Motion to approve.
Does someone second this motion?
Second,
And who was that?
Naomi Lipnick.
Thank you. All righty, so in order to capture the vote, we'll start with capturing any objections to the recommendation, to the motion to approve. Is there any board member here that objects to making a recommendation to approve to the full board? Seeing none, is there anyone that wishes to abstain? Seeing none, is there anyone who is ineligible to vote? All right, the motion carries unanimously to recommend a recommendation to approve the special permit application. This will be done at our January 9th meeting. Just for the record, I just want to say we have 14 members present, unanimous. All right.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much. This public hearing is concluded at 6:15 p.m. And as a reminder, immediately following at 6:30, we have our transportation committee meeting, and I encourage you all to be there. We still are under a state of emergency, so having any votes for a recommendation that you'd like. I am off to a borough board meeting. Good luck. If I can come back to the transportation meeting, I will. Good night, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night. Yeah, this looks like an angle up, by the way.
What'd you say?
This looks like an angle.
Oh, I think I'll be question so I wouldn't be here.
Can I have this one, right? That's not-
No, that's not what I.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to CB14's Transportation Committee meeting taking place on Thursday, January 5th, 2023. Happy New Year, everyone, at 6:30 p.m. Online via WebEx. My name is Ed Sen, and I am the co-chair of the Transportation Committee along with my colleague, Steve Cohen. Steve, any remarks? I just wanted to just briefly remind everyone, please place yourselves on mute if you're not speaking. We'll be expecting to hear two presentations, but the first being the New York City Department of Transportation preliminary proposal to install bus lanes on Flatbush Avenue, and following that, DOT has updates on the Kings Highway Capital Project. And Steve, I'll let you take it away.
Appreciate it. All right, so as Ed said, we're going to get started with the DOT preliminary proposal to install bus lanes on Flatbush Avenue. And for that, I'd like to welcome Philip Bethel, who's the Deputy Director of Bus Priority at DOT, and Nick Rollison, the Assistant Director of Government and Community Relations at the MTA, to speak to us and let us know what's going on. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. As mentioned, my name is Philip Bethel, and I am the Deputy Director for Bus Priority at New York City DOT. I'm going to try to share my screen, and with any luck, this works out. And with any luck, people can see that. Is that right? Wonderful. Thank you. So I'm here, as Stephen mentioned. We have Nick Rollison from MTA, and we also have my colleague Warren Berry from MTA as well, who will also be presenting with me. And so very excited to come to the Transportation Committee here at 14 to talk about this project, what we're calling Flatbush Avenue Bus Priority. I know it was on the agenda as preliminary proposal for bus lanes, but actually we're at the start of this process. So we're beginning a process to look at Flatbush Avenue to understand how can we move the bus faster, how can we make the bus more reliable, how we can provide better service for New Yorkers and Brooklynites on Flatbush Avenue. So that's just the start. That's where we are. So I'm going to run you through this presentation. We have a little bit about the background research we've been doing, some of the types of strategies we may consider on Flatbush Avenue, and where we'll be going from there. That's that. So Flatbush Avenue is part of a suite of projects that were announced in June of this year, coming out of what was called the Transit Improvement Summit between New York City DOT and MTA. And that was an event where the two agencies reiterated their commitment to working together to improve transit service throughout the city, but especially the bus network, completing 150 miles of new enhanced bus lanes throughout the city, and rolling out some signature projects like Flatbush Avenue, which we are starting that process now. Another major impetus as to why we're looking at Flatbush and why we're looking at Flatbush now is the New York City Streets Plan. And so that's a 5-year transportation master plan that was legislatively mandated, and it looks to improve safety, accessibility, and quality of city streets for all New Yorkers. And I think of particular importance, the Streets Plan mandates that DOT look to increase sustainable travel modes, such as the bus. It also has us looking at job opportunities. To how is transit able to connect communities and connect workers to employment? And also a real importance on looking at accessibility, both in terms of mode and for those who are differently abled, but also for New Yorkers of all types, if you will. So why Flatbush Avenue? As you well know, running down the edge of CB14, it's a critical cross-borough transportation corridor. Over 120,000 average daily bus riders use a bus that travels on Flatbush Avenue on 12 routes, and that's 2022 post-pandemic numbers. The B41 itself, running end-to-end on Flatbush, has 23,000 average daily riders. So there are many, many people out there riding the bus on Flatbush Avenue. And unfortunately, they're plagued by very slow bus speeds, as we'll show in a few different areas. Another important point to take away is, unfortunately, Flatbush Avenue is a dangerous avenue. 164 people killed or seriously injured on Flatbush Avenue in the last 5 years. It is a Vision Zero priority corridor for safety improvements, and that is something we're going to be looking at closely as we work through how to improve bus conditions on the corridor. So, New York City DOT has been to Community Board 14 before, and we'll be back soon enough on this project and others, but we've done a number of different things on Flatbush Avenue to try to improve things. We've done a variety of projects that look at traffic congestion. How can we move traffic better, be it through signal timing modifications or other efforts. We've looked at pedestrian safety. We've been building out public spaces like Hillel Place Plaza, and also looking to improve bicycle connections with the protected bicycle lane along Prospect Park Avenue. So we're in the sort of the beginning stages of our outreach. We're starting to now go out to the community boards and sort of give this very first touch, if you will, as we start the project. We did have a kickoff in June, and we have started a community advisory board process as well. We have started to do some on-street outreach as well. We've started talking to area merchants to learn about their business needs, what type of loading that they do, what hours, what types of vehicles, as we find that's very useful information at this early stage of the project. And we're looking at getting out this spring, actually, to do more merchant surveys, but also to start talking to New Yorkers out on the street on Flatbush Avenue, talk to people about how they get around, how they interact with Flatbush Avenue in their neighborhood. You're well aware that we're here in Brooklyn CB14, but the corridor does run approximately 7 miles through a number of different community boards, almost 1 million residents in the area, and of particular interest to bus priority and transit. Roughly 60% of households don't have access to a private vehicle, and 76% commute to work via public transit, walking, or biking. Also of note, 70% of residents are non-white. And so just in terms of little overview, I'll skim through this as you are all locals. You know how this works. You're familiar with the corridor, but it is a major important corridor spanning from downtown Brooklyn all the way down to Kings Plaza. Variety of different commercial hubs, cultural institutions, lots of hospitals, lots of schools. Northern section, that connection downtown Brooklyn and Manhattan Bridge. It's a lot of traffic in that area. And then through Empire Boulevard to Nostrand in the middle, much more smaller scale commercial neighborhood, and a similar feel until you get down to Kings Plaza, where the roadway widens out a fair bit. Of note to our street design for this corridor on Flatbush Avenue, very different types of street designs that we have in the area. In the northern section, downtown Brooklyn, it's a street that's really dedicated to getting vehicles on and off Manhattan Bridge. Coming down to the middle section, Empire Boulevard and Ocean Avenue, if you're familiar, actually becomes much, much narrower at around 54 feet or so, with just room generally for one travel lane in each direction and a turn lane plus parking, really serving those small scale commercial uses with a lot of curb access, loading, pickups, drop-offs. And then once you get south of Avenue S and Utica Avenue, becomes a much, much wider road at 130 feet or so, approaching Klink's Plaza. So as we start thinking through how can we speed the bus up, what sort of improvements might we be able to make, we are thinking about these different cross sections and what might be a particularly good alternative in one area may not work in another. So this is something that we're thinking on. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Warren Barry from MTA. He's going to discuss bus operations and ridership on the corridor.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me out. Just going to do a brief overview of the transit options here and the bus speeds that we've been researching here on the Flatbush corridor. And then I'm going to turn it back over to my colleagues at DOT, and they will finish up the presentation. So yeah, as you know, the B41, as discussed earlier, about 24,000 riders. It's the main bus route on this corridor. We also have secondary routes, the B67, the B9, and the B103, which serves your community board, as well as the Q35 and the BM2. And of course, there's various cross Brooklyn routes, big heavy hitter long distance routes, such as, you know, the B35, B6, B8, B9, the B82, which I think we're going to discuss a little bit later tonight. So those all connect here in CB14 with the B41, going basically across Brooklyn to all sorts of neighborhoods. And then, of course, Flatbush corridor also connects to numerous subway lines, and you know, obviously the Q train in your area, and the 2 and the 5 at Flatbush Junction. Next. So as you can see here, this is the B41 corridor speeds, and this is the AM peak period. The AM is the least congested part of the day for the B41. You can see downtown Brooklyn, once the B41 leaves Flatbush, that top segment, it's already averaging lower than 5 miles per hour, even as just as the day gets started. Moving down to Empire and down towards Flatbush Junction, you can see it's still not going too fast, averaging 5 to 7 miles per hour and 7 to 10 miles per hour in your community district. And then moving forward to the afternoon, you can sort of follow the pattern. Next slide. 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., you can see that it's starting to get more congested. You can see the color going from yellow to orange as the traffic increases throughout the day. So we're back down to what the bus generally averages, about 6 miles per hour throughout the day here in the midday. And then if we go to the next slide, we can see the PM section where the entire area from Empire to Flatbush Junction is in that 5 to 7 mile per hour range. And for comparison's sake, you can see in bullet 2 that the PM peak period takes 9 to 11 minutes longer than the overnight trips, which we measure against because obviously there's less traffic. Obviously, that's congestion, parking, all the issues of commercial areas that you're familiar with throughout Brooklyn. So we're excited about this project to help speed up the B41 for all 24,000 riders daily. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. And so sort of the last part of the background that we've been looking at is really safety. As I mentioned, it's a Vision Zero priority corridor, and these are corridors that we here at DOT have identified as unfortunately being among the most unsafe corridors in the city. In addition, we have 10 Vision Zero priority intersections, which are some of the most dangerous priority intersections in the city. And so in addition to transit improvements, we will be looking at what are different ways, what are the crash patterns at these intersections and other intersections in the corridor, what sort of improvements can we do as part of this project so that we can address safety. As you can sort of see on this chart here, 3,000 people injured in the last 5 years, 155 of them severely, and unfortunately 9 people who lost their lives on Flatbush Avenue in the last 5 years. So this is definitely something we're going to be taking to heart and looking into as we go forward. So we understand that buses on Flatbush Avenue, they may be slow, they may be stuck in traffic. That Flatbush Avenue residents, the visitors demand on the bus mobility, and there's definitely a demonstrated need for safety improvements along Flatbush Avenue. So I'm going to walk you through our bus priority and safety toolkits. And these are different techniques and strategies that DOT has employed in the past to improve bus speeds and increase safety. And this is the menu that we're now starting to consider as we start moving into conceptual design for Flatbush Avenue. So DOT can employ a variety of different bus priority treatments to speed bus service. So most of these strategies reorganize physical space to give buses priority on the street, reduce friction with other vehicles, or allow buses to get a head start on traffic. So bus lanes are one of our go-to tools. They give the bus their own lane to travel in. They may run along the curb, as you can see in the middle, bottom middle of this figure, or they may run what we call offset from the curb. So in the lane next to the parking lane, this is a design that allows for parking and loading, whereas a curbside bus lane generally does require taking parking away if it already exists. We can also use what we call center running bus lanes. And these are bus lanes that run in the middle of the street next to the double yellow line. One of the advantages to those, that being that it gets it away from the curb lane where you do have a lot of double parking, a lot of loading movements, but it can require a fair bit more physical space in the roadway to build median islands for people to board on. So it can definitely speed the bus very quickly, but does require taking more, if you will, from other travel lanes or other uses. Another strategy we've been using in other parts of the city are busways or transit and truck priority corridors. And so these are corridors where it's a street where through traffic is restricted to allow buses to operate quickly and efficiently. And so in these cases, only buses, trucks, and emergency vehicles are allowed through access. All other vehicles, you're allowed local access to any given block, but you then must make the first right turn after making your drop off or parking, whatever you're doing, that local access on the block. We've tried these in a variety of different commercial areas in the city, including on J Street in Brooklyn, but also 14th Street in Manhattan, Main Street in Flushing, Jamaica, and Archer Avenues in Queens. And we do find that they're very effective in moving the buses, especially in commercial areas that have high curb demand. And then finally, on the bottom right, queue jump signals is a more targeted intervention that we can do. And this allows for optimizing traffic signals for bus throughput. And so we can allow the bus to get a head start on traffic at a traffic light to allow it to get into or out of a bus stop, most generally. So it's a smaller intervention, but it can be very useful, especially at locations with lots of queuing from traffic that prevent the bus from getting through the intersection. So while the bus priority toolkit is designed to speed bus service and minimize time that riders wait at the stops, we do want to think about making that experience at the stop more comfortable as well. City DOT installs a variety of different measures, including leaning bars and benches, shelters. Physical accessibility is something we've been working on a lot in our group lately in terms of some bus stops, if they're not accessible to persons with limited mobility, we'll go ahead and we'll add new concrete to make sure that a wheelchair can get on and off the bus easily. It's important. And then we also have been utilizing bus boarders, picture on the bottom right, which allows us to bring the bus stop to the travel lane, meaning that a bus doesn't have to spend its time pulling its way into the parking lane, loading, unloading passengers, and then waiting for a gap in traffic to get back onto its trip. So we've been using these rubber bus boarders, as you can see here. And then in terms of pedestrian safety, we do have a variety of different tools that we can use. I'm sure you've seen some of these in the neighborhood, but pedestrian islands and median extensions, pedestrian safety measures that we can use, as well as painted curb extensions to shorten crossing distances and for larger streets to allow pedestrians a refuge between light cycles as they wait. Also, similar to the bus boarding border that we showed in rubber, we also build these out of concrete, bus boarding islands, either, so I think someone might want to mute. Thank you. But bus boarding islands that provide safe, comfortable places for buses to wait. We often use for those center running bus lane designs where the bus no longer stops on the curb of the street, but now stops on a designated transit island in the center of the street, as in Kings Highway, as shown here. And then as buses have to access the curb to make stops, parking and loading regulations are actually one of our most useful tools, making sure that the buses can travel smoothly, especially in neighborhoods with high demand for curb access. And so tweaks to curb regulations can help manage double parking and ensure that access to residences and businesses is easy, while also speeding buses along. So those are some of the tools that we can use. To talk just briefly about next steps and where we're going from here. So we're currently in the sort of the feedback gathering and analysis stage. We're working on a conceptual design right now. We're sort of doing these first touches, but we'd like to return to the community board in the future once we have some actual concrete concepts to share. So we're currently at the sort of that stage now. We'll be going through an iterative process where we'd like to, come back to the community board, come back to the community advisory board with these, with a concrete proposal, discuss that, gain feedback, then we can refine that and move towards project implementation. So right now we are working on concept designs. We're also starting to work on a traffic analysis and other background data. We're excited, as I mentioned, to be here talking to you today to get some of your feedback at the high level on your experiences with Flatbush Avenue and Community Board 14, as well as in Brooklyn. We'll be launching an online survey for the general public where they can use a map and actually let us know, oh, this intersection is often very congested, or there's not enough time to cross the street at this crossing traffic light, that sort of tool. And we're looking forward in 2023 to really continue with outreach and start putting together a plan that we can share with you and move forward. And so that's a lot from me, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen. But we'd like to, to open it up to the board or the public or however you would like to run your meeting. But to get some initial thoughts from the board. So I've lost. I had one more slide that's disappeared, but basically, I think we're from our perspective here at DOT, we're most interested from hearing what are your experiences on Flatbush Avenue, what works, what doesn't, and specifically any experience you may have with using the bus. And basically, would like to give the board the opportunity to sort of help guide us in where we should be focusing our efforts. Anything specific at the local level that you can bring to our attention that maybe doesn't come out in the MTA speed data or the observations that we do. So really appreciate you taking the time, and I'll leave it to the board as to how you'd like to handle discussion.
Thank you very much, Philip. We really appreciate all that. It was a lot of slides, so thanks for going through that as quickly as you could and giving us all the information we need. If folks have questions, you can use the raise hand function, or alternatively, if you wanted to put a question in the chat, I could read it out. Before we get to, we'll do board member questions first, and then non-board members. Before we get started with that, I did want to extend our welcome to some folks who are attending on council members' behalfs. I see Sabrina DeJuste is here from Farrah Lewis's office. Welcome. And Joel Desouvet, who introduced himself in the chat, is here from council member Rita Joseph's office. So thank you both for attending. Anyone have any questions? Okay, I'm seeing some now. Carl Henry Cesar, you have your hand up.
So folks, good evening. Happy belated New Year. And so Barry, thank you very much to you and your colleague for the presentation. I have a question. Could you share the slide deck again? I had a question about I think the last two slides that showed the timelines. So I think it was slide 24, maybe. Yes.
This one or that 24? One?
This one, yes. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Philip. So basically, my first question is just, we're right at the start of 2023, and so my question is the items that are listed fall, winter 2022 and 2023, are those still on track? And, if have any of those items been completed? Because I'm assuming with the item that's grayed out in June 2022, that means, as things are being completed, they'll be grayed out. So that's my first question.
Yes, I'm not muted. Great. Yeah, so we are on track. I guess that should actually say fall, winter. You're right. It should be 2022, 2023. So yes, we're looking in the near future to launch that online survey. And we're currently working on the conceptual plans and the outreach.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then my other question too is, you had mentioned before that part of this work is mandated per the city streets that was passed in 2021, if I remember correctly. And so then does that mean that basically at the latest, whatever comes out of the Flatbush, plans, that needs to be implemented by end of calendar year 2026? Is that what that means? I'm trying to figure out what is the end date? So those are my questions.
I think the end, off the top of my head, so I have to actually go back to the slide myself. Basically, we are, where's the street? Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, so the streets plan came out in 2021. I believe it goes through 2025, actually, but I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately. But yes, that does mandate 150 miles of protected bus lanes, and so we are considering whatever we do on Flatbush Avenue will be part of that 150 miles.
Okay.
Whether we haven't, part of the streets plan process and part of the work we do here in Bus Priority is trying to do the most impactful projects we can. And so while the corridor is 7 miles long, that doesn't mean we might necessarily do 7 miles of just bus lane. Just to meet that number. But yes, we're working on we have a ambitious work plan for 2023. And then we're going to have an ambitious work plan for 2024 and 2025. So this is part of the overall plan. Thank you, Carl.
No problem. Thank you very much for those answers. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Carl. Liz Denny's, you want to go ahead and ask any questions you have?
Yeah, hi. I had a couple of questions. First you had mentioned that you're looking at this in segments, and I totally understand that there are different components, different parts of the street look different and can maybe use different things. I would note that in the B35 bus lane on Church Avenue, with only a really small amount of the bus route being a bus lane, it's really, really, really slow and unreliable and clumps still in the part where it isn't. And then, the part where there's only parking regulation changes, the bus, it really struggles to get through, and it's sort of it's a very similar configuration of two traffic lanes both ways as the part of Flatbush that you've, mentioned is a part of this district. And, I encountered kind of the same issues on Flatbush Avenue now as I did on Church before the bus lane, where often, one double parked car slows the whole corridor down. And that happens, especially around late afternoons or in evenings. Or at mornings when you go south. I think that's probably why there's a big delay there. And so, I just wanted to note, I wondered if DOT has any information about how the success of projects that have gone the whole span versus projects that have only really put bus lanes or made significant changes in a small part of it. It seems to me as a bus rider that it usually works better the longer the bus lane is. But, I'm just wondering if DOT had any data on that.
Yeah, we definitely do have data on Church Ave, and we have been looking at Church Ave in that it is where it crosses Flatbush, has some similar sort of land use characteristics there. I don't actually have Church Ave speed data in front of me, unfortunately. I think that probably is something
So I was just gonna say, I think so one of your colleagues actually presented it to us a couple of meetings ago and noted that there was a modest improvement. I mean, it's not actually modest when you're riding it; it's a couple minutes, but it's it's less of an improvement, I think, than we've seen in like the 14th Street busway and so forth. In the section where there's a bus lane, and there was actually a slowdown in the section where only parking regulations were changed since the lane was put in. So I just was wondering if there's a more comprehensive version of that throughout the city, because it sounds like if you mentioned you want to make the biggest impact. We don't, I think bus riders and people would just prefer to actually feel that impact instead of kind of getting a little bit around the edges.
Understood. Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate the rider experience there in terms of what is and isn't working for you on Church Avenue. Yeah, no, definitely we do evaluate our projects, and we do take note of what works and what doesn't. Our colleagues at MTA are actually very useful in being able to give us that block by block, stop by stop, look at the data in terms of where are we seeing a greater increase than not. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. My co-chair, Ed Sen, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a few thoughts. Philip, thank you for your presentation, and I want to echo what Liz just said with regards to just more data. Is there specific benchmarks that the DOT or the MTA has in terms of what is is considered an improvement? I mean, looking at the report that was shared with us from Church Avenue, the greatest improvement was from 4.8 miles per hour to 6 miles per hour, which is an increase of 24%. But in terms of mileage per hour, I mean, it's minimal at best. So just looking at other projects like Liz had mentioned throughout the city, what is the benchmark, and what are the metrics that we are looking or seeking to gain? And to what Liz mentioned regarding double park, like what is enforcement like on within DOT to help address some of these issues, especially along Flatbush Avenue? And lastly, another DOT matter. Is there any internal discussions with, I guess, regarding open restaurants and having some of these, whatever the term is, I'm sorry, I'm blanking at the moment. The sidewalk cafes or whatever's taking up parking spots, and like how that affects, especially in the corridor that's in our within our community board. So if you could address
Yeah.
some of these, that would be wonderful.
I will take the first two, and I will probably punt the third to Diana. So you've been warned, Diana. In terms of data, we don't have a strict benchmark that we use to say, is it successful, is it not successful? We are definitely looking, we are often looking at that percentage change a lot more than sheer miles per hour, because even a 2 mile per hour increase in bus speed is very useful. And as the MTA can certainly talk to across the course of the full Flatbush Avenue, that means they may be able to run more buses per hour if they can get those buses through the corridor. In terms of enforcement, we do work with the NYPD to try to make sure that they are enforcing the bus lanes. It doesn't always work as well as we'd like. One of the things we've been having great success with lately on all of our new bus lane projects is bus lane enforcement cameras. And so that is something we've been rolling out on all of our new bus lane projects. So we've been using fixed cameras, which are particularly good at preventing vehicles that drive in the bus lane, issuing warnings when they first launch, but then tickets. And we've often seen sort of recidivism go down over time on those. And the MTA, and I don't know if the MTA can speak to this on Flatbush, I don't recall if it's been rolled out, but the MTA has been rolling out what they call ABLE, and that's an on-bus camera system that allows for basically if a bus passes a car that is parked in a bus lane, it can issue a ticket to them. And we've been seeing some really good success with that. I'm not, Warren or Nick, could you speak? Do we have ABLE yet on Flatbush?
It's not on the B41 yet, but we do have plans to install 600 more cameras by the end of 2023. And the overall goal by the end of next year is to have able cameras on 85% of existing bus lanes in the city. So not 85% of the total buses in the city, but 85% of coverage of buses that serve the bus lanes. So, for example, the most recent rollout was it's on the Q44, a couple of other areas in Queens. So right now we're targeting the able cameras on areas that have existing bus lanes, but the B46 has them, for example, on Utica, and we're working as hard as we can to provide coverage on any area that has a bus lane with the able cameras.
Thank you, Warren. I guess in terms of open restaurants, it's something that we look at when we're doing our design process, certainly. Obviously, open restaurants in the roadbed and curbside bus lanes, really, they can't work in the same space. But Diana, could you speak a little bit about open restaurants in Brooklyn?
It's been a huge rollout, I know, since the beginning of the pandemic. Right now we have restaurant owners apply for the open restaurants program, and we do have inspectors go out and verify the plans submitted to us and whether or not the site is eligible for seating. Restaurants that do apply on bus routes should be declined. I understand there's some business owners who put up their seating, albeit on the bus lane, but we do get reports, and when we receive community feedback on when that happens, we do go out there and enforce. I hope that answers that question.
I guess we can move on to the next question. Nina Saab, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I have two issues, one of which relates directly to buses and accessibility. I know that, the accessibility for people in wheelchairs is very, very important, but something that's sometimes overlooked is the issues for people who may not be in wheelchairs, but still have limited mobility. And I know personally, having had multiple orthopedic surgeries and being on crutches, I've had buses that I couldn't get on because they couldn't go low enough, and I didn't have the physical strength to make that leap up to the stairs. And I'm just wondering if there's some way that some of these curb loading areas can be configured in such a way that people who are maybe using walkers or crutches or other things don't have quite so much of a struggle. So that's one question more for the MTA. And then the other is an issue. It's a safety issue directly regarding Flatbush Avenue. And on multiple occasions, I very nearly became a statistic because at the intersection where Flatbush Ave crosses Newkirk, and then you have Bedford as sort of a hop up. There are these massive trucks that come roaring down Flatbush Avenue, and they do not stop for the red lights. They do not stop when pedestrians are in the lead pedestrian interval, and actually in the intersection, because they had the walk light and started out, and then these trucks are roaring through. There has to be some kind of enforcement and limitation, and just, I don't know, a stop to these massive trucks on residential streets. I mean, I don't know what else to say except that it's terrifying. So thank you.
I guess I want to ask Diana, is that something that the Brooklyn Borough Commissioner's Office can take to the NYPD, or how that might work?
That would go to the MTA from what I've heard about.
Oh, for the trucks.
Oh, for the trucks, yes.
Yeah.
That's okay. I was thinking, I concentrated on the design part. Again, enforcement is definitely NYPD. But please call our borough commissioner's office, talk to your community board about trucks parking. We will be in constant communication with the local precinct to go out there and enforce double parked trucks as well as on bus lanes.
But then there was also, just for our own edification, was also, I think, yes, non-compliance with traffic signals by trucks, just to get Nina's full point.
Got it.
And then I
Yeah,
guess in
another,
terms of, oh, sorry.
yeah, good. Non-compliance with traffic. I understand the grievance with the truck drivers. I have my own grievances with them as a driver and pedestrian. However, it's something to go back to NYPD about, as well as regarding enforcement with traffic logistics and signals.
I guess I'll give one note on the design part of Nina's first point, and then I'll turn over to MT, I guess, on general accessibility. But certainly in terms of building out either bus borders or bus boarding islands in concrete as opposed to rubber, that is something we do think about. Because one of the issues sometimes with a bus stop that is on the curb lane is you do have people parking the bus stop, which requires people in walkers, on crutches, wheelchairs to step down into the roadway around a illegally parked car and onto the bus. And so making sure that there is a nice connection between the bus and the sidewalk is something that we do strive for. And part of that is also one thing that makes it a little bit difficult, but we do try to overcome, is the making sure we do have a nice high curb where the bus meets the sidewalk there. You have to make sure you don't ruin the drainage of the roadway. That is something that we do take into account when we're designing these, to try to make sure that you have the smallest step up you can from the sidewalk to the bus.
Is MTA gonna add anything there, or should we move on?
Yeah, I'll just say that we and DOT as well are both committed to providing ADA compliant bus stops at every bus stop in the city. The standard is a 5x8 landing pad for the ramp. So if there's any bus stops in your area that don't meet or that don't comply with the ADA regulation, those are the minimums. Please let us know, and we'll go out and investigate with DOT bus stop management. We have tried our hardest and are continuing to try our hardest to make every bus stop in the city ADA compliant. So please let us know if there's something that doesn't meet the standard, and we'll go and investigate. I obviously can't comment on a specific bus stop if I haven't seen it, but that's a goal of the agency, and we'll look into that as soon as possible if there's an issue.
Great, thank you. Glenn Woolen, you have a question. Go ahead, Glenn.
Thank you. First is a comment, seeing as how you're not planning on expanding any of the roads, anytime you do something to speed up the buses, which is admirable, it's taking away from either car traffic ability to move or parking. So I find it rather disappointing that you don't have a minimum success level to justify these losses. If you set something up, presumably you're assuming that it's going to be make a significant difference. And if it doesn't, there should be something in place to reverse it. Now, I do have a question about your cameras. You're putting in 600 cameras. Are these cameras meant for ticketing purposes? And if so, what kind of tickets are we talking about? Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll take the first part, and then off the top of my head, I don't recall. They are ticketing cameras, but maybe, I don't know, Warren or Nick, if you know the details on the Able cameras. But in terms of traffic, we do traffic analysis for all of our projects. And so that's actually the stage often where things might change. So if a proposed design is very deleterious to traffic, we may not go forward with that design. We may tweak that design to try to sort of hit a balance there. But we do monitor projects as they go forward. And so if they're not showing the results for bus riders that we want, or they're extremely deleterious to traffic, we may come back and rethink how to best meet our goals there.
If I might, I think my point is that you seem to imply that you don't have a specific goal. That is to say, a vague generalization that we want to improve the speed by which the buses move, but you don't have, say, if it doesn't improve it by at least 40% or some such, then we are going to redo it or remove it or something. But you don't have anything like that. So the 24%, 2 mile an hour on Church Avenue seems to be satisfactory, where I don't think it really is, not given how much it slows down the car traffic and how many parking spaces are lost. So we're just saying it's very disappointing you don't have a specific guideline as to what is an acceptable improvement in bus movement. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Was there anyone from MTA who wanted to respond to Glenn's question about the cameras?
Sure. I posted a link to the most recent press release. So those are fixed mounted cameras that are on the front of the buses. I believe the ticket starts at $50. And at some point, if you receive multiple tickets, the fine goes up to $250. I'm not 100% sure at what point you become a repeat offender and the fine goes up. But I do know that the ticket ranges from $50 at first up to $250. And
$250 is after is on the fifth offense.
Fifth offense. Okay.
Yeah.
And also, as part of that program, you do not get ticketed for the first photo. You have to be ticketed by one bus, and then a second bus has to come by and take a second photo. So you are allowed to obviously park in the bus lanes for standing, not park, but to do drop-offs. So in the ABLE program, you do not get a ticket until the second bus comes by and sees you parked in the bus lane.
So am I right to understand that these cameras will be mounted on the buses themselves?
That's correct. Yeah, they're in the front of the bus, in the top of the windshield.
And you have to be in that location long enough for 2 buses to capture it before you get a ticket.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, that seems pretty lenient. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. District Manager Sean Campbell, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to sort of underscore Glenn's comment about there not being a benchmark goal, because that's something that I've heard from a number of different sources, and DOT has responded in the same way that there isn't one, and there also isn't a cost-benefit analysis and that sort of thing. So having more of a rubric to go by would be helpful as this moves forward. And I also want to I'm giving you what this office hears from the community as they've experienced the Church Avenue bus lanes, most specifically, and a request again, and I know you've heard it and I know you do it, but a request again for transparency. When the Church Ave bus lane project started, there was a survey of the merchants on Church, and there was, you mentioned, Philip, that you're asking questions about about delivery times, and I want to make sure that those questions about their truck delivery times are couched in the plan with the bus lane, because last time around they were asked about truck deliveries, not knowing why those questions were being asked, and they felt sideswiped. That was a really bad choice of words. But the other thing is the metered parking that moves over to side streets and residential streets. I want to make sure that outreach is robust. And those community members who live on those side streets, especially the more residential ones, are aware of what they'll be asked to trade off, because often with a broad-based benefit comes a hyper-local trade-off. And so we've got one block off of the Church Avenue bus lane that has the metered parking on their street, which has just been expanded because of some construction on the other side. A truck delivery window has just been added to their residential side. And then at the other end of the block is a city bike station. So they feel sort of pummeled by these installations that are surrounding them in terms of their on-street parking. So those are my comments, because that's what I hear about the most. And the Church Avenue presentation, the follow-up presentation, is in the chat here. You can reach the office for a copy of that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sean.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you,
oh,
Sean.
go ahead.
Yeah, definitely appreciate you passing it along from everybody you speak to.
Thanks, Philip. Florencia, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Good night, everyone. I just wanted to ask, so what happens if two buses come one behind each other? If the first bus took a photograph and the second bus came shortly behind, what happens then?
So you're asking if the buses ticket one another when they're running their route?
I think it's when there's bunching sometimes with the buses. So
Right.
Glenn's observation about leniency might not always stick when the buses are bunching. But Florencia, they would get a ticket, but it would be time stamped, and they could make an argument that it was within 2 minutes or something like that. Tell anybody that happens to call our office for assistance. I don't think it'll
Okay.
be that often.
Thanks, Sean. No, I know. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe in that scenario. Believe it or not, there's someone that reviews all of these tickets individually by watching the video at this point. It's not fully automated. So whoever happened to review the video to confirm that the ticket was necessary would be the one who judges if the bus was illegally parked in the lane or not, or you know, if the person is deserving of a ticket based on the video footage. As far as I understand, it's still manually reviewed.
And it's reviewed by by the Department of Transportation, not by the MTA. This is Rob Thompson at MTA.
Okay.
Thank you. I see Musa, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for speaking with us. I had two questions. Could you describe the outreach approach you'll be taking to survey bus riders specifically to get their takes on the people who actually ride these buses? And my second one is, does any of this, when we're thinking about bus lanes or street designs, generally speaking, in different portions of Flatbush, can I assume that all bus stops will have those like concrete pads to support their weight? I know we have some areas in our neighborhood, like on Church, in front of the Church train station, there's a bus stop, and the floor has just become so warped because there is no concrete pad. Thank you.
Great. Yes. So in terms of outreach for bus riders, we're looking to, in the spring, start with talking to really not so much even bus riders, but pedestrians. So people on the sidewalk on Flatbush Avenue with our street ambassador teams. And they will often go out to a site and they'll spend a day really just talking to passerby. And often we'll have a prepared survey that asks, why are you walking on Flatbush Avenue today? Where do you live? Where do you work? What's your primary purpose for being on Flatbush Avenue today? Those sorts of general questions to get a sense there. And then in terms of bus lanes, for this project, we're thinking this is what we call a street improvement project. And these are projects that we build sort of with our quick build materials. These are materials and designs that we can build quickly within a year in-house. And so generally we don't do major capital concrete work like street reconstruction. We can build smaller concrete items like certain types of bus boarding islands. We can build pedestrian islands because they don't generally go deep enough to affect utilities. But we would not be adding new concrete bus pads as part of this project. However, if there are problem ones that you've noticed that do require maintenance or reconstruction, you can definitely reach out to our borough commissioner's office and make sure that we can get a crew out there to make sure it's not unsafe or get that added to the priority repair list.
Great, thank you. Mehdi, I see you have a question in the chat. I don't, if you want to ask it verbally, so because I don't want to risk misstating or misunderstanding what you're getting at. If that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is whether we will be presented some alternatives, some scenarios before we have a final plan. And if that's happening, assuming that this is happening, then I would want to know why some parts of this stretch won't be dedicated bus lane. Just some
Understood.
transparency on the decision making.
Understood. Yeah. So we definitely will be touching base with the different community boards, transportation committees throughout the process. But yeah, we anticipate we'd like to bring you much more sort of fleshed out concepts, potential options for different treatments in different parts of Flatbush Avenue. That'd be our next touch point. And then we'd be taking your feedback there, and we'd like to come to then what we would consider sort of the final concept. And it's certainly at that point we could discuss with you why we may have gone for one option versus another option in a given place.
Great, thank you. I know Liz, you have your hand up, and Sabrina, you have your hand up, and there's some other folks from the community who have their hands up. But before we circle back to Liz, I did have, I guess, two questions and a comment. I'll try to state them as quickly as I can. The first is the MTA is proposing a bus redesign project. And part of that includes shortening the B41 route slightly at the ends, it appears, as well as removing some stops. Not that many, it looked like in our district, but some stops along the route. So I was curious if it's been measured, if that redesign proposal was adopted, what the speed improvements or what other improvements might be as a result. The second question is if there is a bus lane implemented, I guess particularly for our community district, I'm curious if as part of that, DOT would measure the degree to which traffic car traffic and truck traffic, I guess, is being redistributed to neighboring streets like Ocean Avenue, Bedford, or Rogers. For the parts of the district, especially that where those routes run parallel. And the comments, I'm pretty open-minded in terms of the solutions you laid, or the possible processes and ways to address improving bus speeds on Flatbush Avenue. I guess the one that I just think is a bit of a non-starter, in my opinion, is the busway. It's one thing for 14th Street in Manhattan where you have all these parallel routes, so there's a lot of other options for drivers. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why I think a busway would be a complete non-starter for Flatbush. In terms of the amount of additional car traffic you'd be sending to Washington, the lack of access to Manhattan Bridge. There's I could go on and on, but I just wanted to make sure it was stated that at least from my standpoint, and other people are more than welcome to chime in, but I just don't think a busway is a reasonable proposal for this particular corridor. Thank you.
I guess Warren or maybe would you like to speak to the redesign, or Nick?
Hey, yeah, thank you. This is Nick Rollison. So I just put some links in the chat for the Brooklyn Bus Network redesign. At the moment, we're taking all the feedback that we can get. I will note that on February 23rd, we're doing a virtual town hall or public workshop, excuse me, for specifically for CB14. So if anybody has any particular feedback, questions, or if you want to see the plan in more in-depth nature, you can come to that public workshop, and you can find all that information on the link that I put there in the chat. Generally speaking, I would just say that we have put the Flatbush Avenue bus priority in, it's highlighted in the plan, and it's something that we're looking forward to including in the process. I don't have any details on those specific routes. I don't know if Warren can speak to any specific bus stops, but yeah, I would encourage everybody to come to the workshop in February. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I do believe, and I myself have not memorized the entire redesign plan, but I do believe there's a shortened B41 variant that's being introduced or being proposed. That's now going to be called the B40. That instead of that's going to end at Empire and turn back around. So it's going to be renamed the B40. Actually, it's not going to just be called the B41 anymore. So the bus can turn around and get back providing service to your area instead of continuing all the way to downtown Brooklyn. And then I think there was another question about bus stops. And yes, right now, one of the stated goals of the redesign is to take the average bus stop spacing. I think in Brooklyn is around 800 feet, and we're trying to move that to above 1,000 feet in between stops. We average about 20-30 seconds per stop. So, as you've seen around Brooklyn, we have some bus stops that are 2-3 blocks apart from each other. So we are trying to go through and rationalize the stops and find a way to streamline the process by not having bus stop so often. If there's a specific stop, you can make a comment. There's a digital map in the Remix program, and you can comment on actual specifics. And then, as Nick said, we'll have a community-specific presentation, I believe is sometime in February for CB14. So there should be plenty of time to address your concerns. And this is just the beginning, and we're welcoming all feedback. And if you've looked at the Queen's draft plan, you can see that we've done significant changes on that following public feedback. So happy to hear what you have to say.
And then just I will mention, yes, we do post project monitoring. And so depending on how a project goes, if it is something we expect there to be significant diversions or significant diversions, we will be collecting data both on the street where the project is, but then on subsequent side streets. One of the tools we often use is called INRIX, and that's actually it's a big data. How does one describe it? It's a big data software package that takes cell phone data from pedestrians, from drivers, and is actually able to give us a good sense of what is travel speed on any given road in the city. And so that's a nice tool that we do use to do before and after surveys to see, okay, if, for example, your example of the busways, that is something we look at very closely with busways because those involve major diversions. So we do see what is the effect on bus speeds, what are the effects on car speeds in those situations, and adjust accordingly.
Got it. Thank you very much, Philip. All right, so we'll circle back to Liz. Go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly note that, it sounds like there's a little bit of concern potentially over, cars just dropping off or picking up legally, which is legally allowed in the bus lane, getting tickets. And, it looks in the toolkit, there are some designs that make it easier to keep the busway clear and still allow people to get drop off, pick up, and so forth. And I would just, encourage, if we can reduce, I don't think anyone wants to get a ticket. I think people want to do the right thing. But that both has the benefit of, that fear kind of goes away. And also those designs seem to be the kind that keep the bus and only the bus in that lane anyway, to keep the bus going quickly. So just wanted to suggest that as something to look into.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And it's something that we do spend a lot of time thinking about in the design process. So for example, curbside lanes is one option. It does not take away a travel lane, but they are often very not effective for bus lanes because they invite people to park or stop in the bus lane next to the curb. So that's definitely something that we think about. And in terms of sort of signage and busways and something we're always thinking about in terms of how can we better refine our processes to make things clear. We don't want to be giving people tickets. We want to be able to help everybody get around. So thank you, Liz.
Great, thanks. Sabrina DeJuice from Farrell Lewis's office. Go ahead.
Can I be heard? Can everyone hear me clearly? Just want to make sure. Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Sabrina Dujist. I'm the Constituent Service Liaison for Councilman Farrah Lewis of District 45. Thank you, everyone from DOT and MTA for being here and doing this presentation. This is a very important topic to discuss. So just so you guys, I know you guys are all aware, but the 41 goes between two districts, District 40 and District 45. So on our end for District 45, we received a lot of negative feedback about the proposal about the installation of bus lanes in District 45. And definitely want to have a further conversation about it because there's just a lot of moving parts. And I want to echo a few people, such as I believe Glenn, District Manager Campbell, and along with the chair, Mr. Cohen, because you guys mentioned about taking away parking and then the parking meters possibly being installed into residential areas. Not only if this is something that does happen, unfortunately, we're also seeing this potentially in another area where DOT is trying to install parking meters in a more Jewish populated area, and we've received a lot of negative feedback about that. So there's just a lot of moving parts that just need to be discussed, and I think as it was mentioned, there's no goal and nothing's been finalized yet, but there's just a lot that needs to be taken into consideration of. And we would love to support you guys in kind of doing outreach to get more feedback so you guys can get that more data or more responses. In addition to as Chair Cohen said, this the bus network redesign. That's another big factor that needs to be taken into consideration because nothing's been finalized, but the proposals as well. Implementing that Flatbush Avenue, as you guys already know, take on the 41, the Q35, the 103, the 11, the BM2, so many different buses. So adding a bus lane into that, I think will also, in my opinion, add on to the traffic congestion with cars. But that's something that we can definitely discuss a little bit further. But like I mentioned, our office would love to have a further discussion with you guys to kind of support to get more feedback from the community. If you guys are not getting enough, I know you guys already did your own outreach. You had 100 attendees in one small meeting, but then you also did your survey. But definitely that's not enough. We have thousands of constituents in our district combined in District 40 and 45. And would love for you guys to kind of get more feedback, more accurate feedback and honest feedback about the possible installation of bus lanes on Flatbush Avenue.
Well, thank you. So definitely noted on the complexity and some of the feedback you've already heard. And yes, we're very happy to work with you on that.
I'll leave my information in the chat so we can kind of get that going.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, Philip. All right, I guess we can move on to community members. Victoria, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, hi. I'm Victoria Ortori. I am a person who lives in the neighborhood. I live right on Linden and Flatbush, so I'm very, very familiar with the B41 and Flatbush Avenue. I had a couple questions, suggestions, whatever. Honestly, I have been so frustrated with the B41 bus. I hate it. I have waited for 45 minutes for a bus to come in the winter, whatever. And I pretty much try to avoid it because it's so unreliable. And this also goes for the B35. I mean, all the buses in my neighborhood, frankly, suck. So my question sort of was, would you guys consider doing, I think, a center lane bus lane where it's completely dedicated? There's no chance of double parking. It's not going to get rid of parking spaces. It's not going to block loading zones. Or alternatively, like, would you do kind of a two-way at one side of the street that is strictly buses and then traffic flows, bidirectionally on the other side of the street just to, mitigate all the double parking things, the trucks sitting in the bus lane, the triple parking, all the things that slow down the bus. And I know it's probably a bold, proposal, but I think also when you're talking about if you're only seeing marginal improvements when you implement these kind of things, like such as like the B35 and its curbside, and you're only seeing, a 1 mile per hour improvement, and then everybody turns around and says, was it worth it? So I mean, would the DOT consider kind of doing a more bold thing, try to get those improvement numbers way up so there is no kind of ambiguity as whether it was worth it or not? That was kind of part one of my question. And then part two, and I don't know if this is DOT or not, sorry, I'm not that familiar with which agency does what in the city. But we were also talking about like trucking, and I live also, the back of my building faces Caton Avenue, so I listen to
I can hear 53 and just huge trucks rumbling down behind my building day and night. They engine brake, they honk their horns, they cause traffic delays, they're dangerous. So my question, and this isn't really bus related, and I recognize that, but since you're here, I'm going to grab your ear for a second. Is DOT the one that reaches out to like our shipping partners, and is there any progress or action happening about figuring out like the last mile shipping things to get these 53s and even the 26-foot trucks and stuff off the streets? And or is there any kind of plan to have like delivery windows, so like say early in the morning before rush hours, later at night? And I recognize that might be an inconvenience to business owners, but I think the greater good kind of outweighs that. When you're talking about people who live here 365 days a year and are putting up with the truck traffic and the pollution and the particulates in the air and all that stuff that happens from all the traffic. And I know, like I said, I know that's not specifically bus related, except for when like trucks are parked in the bus lane to load and unload, but I just wanted to kind of bring that up real quick. So so bold action on bus lanes and then trucking issues are my two kind of things. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. No, happy to answer questions as best we can, and if not, put you in touch with the right people. To the first question, we're currently keeping an open mind. We haven't pre-selected anything. So certainly center running bus lanes are an option. And I've now heard from you, and we've also heard from some other community boards that have asked us to sort of be bold, as a phrase we had heard. So we're keeping an open mind at this stage, weighing everything carefully, and we'll be bringing those options to you in the future to see if we've been bold enough or not. Part two, we do have a freight unit within New York City DOT that does work on a lot of those issues. They did just release, I know, the New York City Freight Plan, I believe at the end of last year, which addresses some of those things. There's a number of different programs that the city's been piloting for off-hour deliveries, as well as different types of delivery lockers or other means to sort of control deliveries on the street. And so I could not find it very quickly on the website when I was just Googling it. So I know we do have some information on the website about that. And if there are specific freight concerns, about, as you mentioned, certain locations where trucks might be off route or it shouldn't be a truck route, I think going through our commissioner or borough commissioner's offices could put you in contact with the right people to get those to the right places.
Great, thank you. Sean Campbell, I still saw you just put your hand
I
back
just
up.
quickly wanted to encourage Victoria and any other members of this assembly to reach out to our office, because I'd be happy to have a longer conversation with you offline about our efforts regarding the 53-foot trucks and freight mobility and the last mile trucking, which is really fallen into Sunset Park. But I'm happy to take a deeper dive and hear more of your suggestions, because I like the way you think. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I will definitely reach out.
Before we get to Matt, I saw Sabrina, you put your hand back up, so I just wanted to let you say whatever
I did.
thing you were saying.
So as you guys were discussing, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I lost my track of thought in that. My main question was really focused on we have the bus lanes, we have these influx of cars now post COVID, we have scooters, we have bikes, we have everything on the street. In addition to our daily sanitation pickups and stuff like that, are you guys going to work with sanitation to probably alter their time along Flatbush and picking up garbage, because that could also affect into the traffic congestion? There's just, like I mentioned, a lot of moving parts along Flatbush Avenue. So I just want to make sure that you guys are kind of taking into consideration every single aspect, especially when it comes to DSNY and them doing their job.
Thank you. I'm not sure if we normally do reach out directly with DSNY. We do work a lot with the fire department in terms of making sure that their trucks can access all buildings and make different turns when we do different design considerations. But yeah, that is a good point. As you mentioned, it is complex.
Because we actually have a fire station right across from our office on Rogers that comes onto Flatbush. But definitely we have sanitation trucks coming up and down Flatbush every day, especially on Fridays, at least for our office, because they offer MLP services to pick up additional garbage. So that's just another factor I wanted to throw in there for you guys to take into consideration.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. All right, Matt, I know you've been waiting a while. Go for it.
Hi, yeah, thank you for this presentation. And I'm looking forward to seeing the preliminary plans once those start coming together. I would like to echo the point about having specific goals for this. I think that's important because I think it's worth making however big of changes we need to make to speed up the buses for the many people who ride them today. And also we know that ridership has dropped a lot as speeds have slowed. So we would expect that as if we can speed up the buses, a lot more people would ride them. And so I think it's worth making sure that we actually achieve that and setting goals so we can keep iterating if the first version doesn't actually accomplish those goals. And also, as long as we have the MTA here, I had a question for the MTA side of things, which is I was wondering if there's any news on all-door boarding for buses. Since the Omni rollout has been progressing, it seems like that's something the MTA could do today that would help speed up buses a little bit.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the all-door boarding will begin when we have completely transitioned to Omni and away from Metro cards.
Cool, thank you.
No problem, thank you.
Thanks. Nina, did you put your hand back up? Do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, this is a little bit piggybacks on something that Matt just said, but also in response to the city rep who was talking about feedback that she's gotten in her district from people who are upset about, that these lanes will slow down traffic. And I think that we, really collectively need to get away from this car-centric thinking, which is destroying our planet faster than we can possibly, undo that damage. That's number one, and mass transit is very much a way out of this. My own personal experience, I don't take the B41. It's rarely on a route I need, but I live right off of the B8, and one of my work locations, I would need to take the B8 to the B46, and I've had situations where the wait time is so insanely long that it just stops making sense. And I guess I'm fortunate that I do have the option of driving the car. And when I have to look at that, I might be standing waiting for one bus for as much as 45 minutes, and then waiting for a second bus, meaning that a 4-hour trip can take as much as 2 hours, which is just beyond absurd. I'm going to opt to drive. And I think that this is something that influences many people in the city, that when mass transit is just so inefficient and so awful, even if it means paying a little more for parking, they may just say, I can't deal with the inefficiency of mass transit. I think we really, really need to do everything in our power to reverse that trend and to make mass transit as efficient and inviting as possible, so that people say, hey, if I can just hop on a bus and know I'm not going to wait more than 6, maybe 10 minutes and, get where I have to go without having to worry about my car and my driving and gas and whatever, that I think that it becomes a real invitation to decreasing the amount of traffic. And that has to be a big goal. Thank you.
Thanks, Nina. Last question, Jeffrey Thomas, go ahead.
Yes. Yes, hi. This is probably going to be a little bit of a involved, hard question, but the timeline for this is a little bit disappointing to me. If I heard you correctly, you're planning on going to the next phase of this project around June, and even that's not actual changes, that's outreach, surveys, planning. You've given the data yourself. There's 30 people killed, seriously injured a year. There are 200,000 riders. That's like, I grew up in a city of 100,000 people. That's twice as many people as the entire population of the city where I grew up. So there's a big sort of practical cost in terms of both, lives impacted, and safety, and also just effectiveness of people getting around from half a year of no changes on the ground. I think this also impacts the schedule for future projects. This is kind of, I think Glenn actually had a good point about goals and objectives and Matt was also saying this, like saying, did this project actually improve things? I'm going to probably have different goal views from Glenn on what should be the standard for success. Like I would say that there should be high standards for whether we count street parking and travel lanes as effective for the community as a whole, knowing that there's, hundreds of times more people who can travel on a bus lane than can park their vehicles on the equivalent, amount of stretch of road. So I'm not sure that the answer, if a project doesn't work out, is to say, oh well, let's go back to parking, let's go back to street parking. But I think both of us would agree, like it would be better if the Church Avenue changes had a bigger impact. In my view, the section on the eastern side near East 18th, etc., which is right where I live on Church Avenue, that's much worse even for drivers. It's gridlocked all the time. There's something going on. There's someone double parked. There's something happening, and it's obvious to me that the bus works so much better on the part with the bus lane, and also that travel does too. But I think we should be able to say, the buses are slowing down. The buses are bunching on this segment. It's good what we did, but it's not. It's not where we wanted to be. What do we do next? And if projects like this take, I think I heard 5 years basically to sort of go end to end, it's 5 years before we can go to the next phase and say, what happens next. Both for safety improvements and both for what happens next. What options are there to speed up timelines on these sorts of projects? I'm not saying we should skip out on public feedback. I'm glad that this is happening. I think a number of folks have raised very good points about more input, more what to do. But what options are there to speed this up?
So understood on the disappointing timeline. We are hoping to be able to do some work this year on that. You had mentioned 5 years, and that's the streets plan, which is the 150 miles of bus lanes. We're not envisioning the Flatbush Avenue project as a 5-year project.
Okay.
Just to be very clear. In terms of sort of process, we do have a fair bit of outreach that we'd like to do, and that is part of the process. And then there is, it is a very, very long corridor. So we are looking to do it right. Not necessarily just quickly, but we are trying to do it as quickly and expeditiously as possible. But I don't have, I think, a good answer on
Yeah,
process.
I understand. It's probably a more complicated question than you can answer this meeting. If I'm not mistaken, also, I think that there was a 2022 goal for number of miles of bus lane that was missed. And so I think, anything that can be done, sort of anything your organization can do overall to sort of say, what can we do to deliver these things more effectively, I think would have a huge impact on people. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you. And thank you so much for the presentation.
Oh yeah, no, I would, and I definitely understand where you're coming from on that, and that is something we're trying to do better and faster. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Philip. It was a very informative presentation, and appreciate you handling all these questions that folks had. We really appreciate your time, and look forward to hearing. We'll look forward to having you back and hearing, what the proposals are when you get to that stage.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me and my colleagues at MTA to talk about this. Don't worry, we have Dustin coming up with more exciting bus news. So thank you so much for your time. I look forward to talking with you again, CB14 soon.
Great, thank you very much. And with that,
Thank
yes,
you, Philip.
with that, yes, there's more. I'll turn it over to Ed to moderate for the second item on the agenda regarding Kings Highway.
All right, thanks, Steve. So we have Dustin Koo, and is Sasha also presenting with you, Dustin, this evening, regarding the Kings Highway Capital Project?
Sasha's not here, but we do have Nick Pettinati, who will be presenting with me on the landscaping plan, and we have Joe Tremonti, my counterpart at MTA, who will be speaking on some bus speed data.
Great. Whenever you're ready.
Sure. Okay. Let me start by sharing my screen. Okay, can you all see this? Great. All right. Thank you all for having me. I'll try to keep this brief, but also want to allow plenty of time for discussion and questions. But I'm here to present to you a project update on the B82 capital project. So today I'll be going through what we've done so far on the SPS project, and then dive into the capital component within the CB14 district. Nick will be going through the landscaping plan, and then we'll talk next steps. So just a quick background update on the project. The B82 was identified as a candidate for SPS conversion in 2009, in part because it is a very busy bus route in Brooklyn carrying 28,000 average daily passengers. It's been historically slow and difficult trip, and it is a Vision Zero priority corridor. Okay, so I got a request to annotate. Is this a mistake? Or did someone have feedback they wanted to give on this slide? I guess not. Okay, I'll continue. I seem to not have control of the screen anymore. 1 second. All right, let's try this again. So a quick overview of the B82 SPS route. It's a 9-mile route. It goes from Gravesend to Stargate City, connects 6 subway lines, 2 SPS routes, and 19 other bus routes. And it also serves part of Brooklyn and New York City that is, lacking sufficient subway access. And so just a quick rundown of where this lies in relationship to your district. The Kings Highway portion of this route touches the southern border of CB14. So we've done a number of outreach so far leading up to the launch of SPS, the B82 SPS in 2018. Leading up to that, we've started from 2015. We've done on-the-street outreach to talk with bus riders. We've met with the Kings Highway bid. We've met with the elected officials, done 8 meetings with bus riders and other local community groups. And for you all specifically, we presented to the Transportation Committee in 2017 and 2018. And most recently, we presented to CB15's Transportation Committee just last month, presenting this slide deck on capital updates. So an overview of the SPS infrastructure improvements. As I mentioned, it launched in October of 2018. We installed red bus lanes and SPS fare machines, bus arrival time information, wayfinding signage. At high ridership stops, we added new benches and leaning bars wherever feasible at these new bus stops, and we rebuilt 8 median bus stops along Kings Highway to make them more ADA accessible. And so now I'll briefly hand it over to my counterpart, Joe from MTA, to talk about bus service improvements as part of this launch.
Okay. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So looking at bus service and the B82 SPS improvements, I'll go over some aspects of that. Looking at speed, the B82 SPS operates 24% faster than the B82 local during the peak periods of the day. With the SPS, adjustments were made. When it was implemented with service hours, and the B82 had midday and late night service added when the SPS was launched. The SPS route was adjusted to reduce some difficult turns and circuitous movements that the previous surface was making. And lastly, signal timing was updated by OT along Kings Highway and Flatlands Ave to improve both bus and traffic flow.
Great, thank you, Joe.
Sure.
And now diving into the improvements along Kings Highway. So if you can think about this capital phase of the project, and as it's the second phase of this SPS launch, where we really try to build out the improvements that were started and implemented in 2018. The scope of this capital project has three distinct segments: Kings Highway, Flatlands Avenue, and Pennsylvania Avenue. So for the purposes of this presentation, we'll be focusing on the scope with along Kings Highway within your district. These are the extents of the capital improvements along Kings Highway that start from Ocean Avenue onto Avenue K. So I'm sure you're all aware of the current issues facing Kings Highway. There are service roads in poor condition, medians are in poor condition, narrow bus stops that are not ADA accessible. They often lack amenities, and we have long unprotected pedestrian crossings that are often very unsafe. So what's included in our improvements along Kings Highway are reconstructing median bus stops to make them wider, make them more ADA accessible. We want to reconstruct the existing medians and add landscaping, which we will go into further detail in this presentation. We're adding curb extensions and pedestrian islands, reconstructing the Kings Highway roadway, repaving it to improve grading and drainage, and creating fresh asphalt to address, fix any potholes that are there. So now we'll go segment by segment, and a lot of the improvements are consistent throughout. So I'll try to go through this very briefly, but feel free later on when we have discussion. I'm happy to go back to any particular location if you have a specific question at a specific location. So from Ocean Avenue to 21st Street, we're adding new pedestrian refuge islands, creating new ADA accessible pedestrian ramps. And from 22nd Street to 23rd Street, we're installing new pedestrian refuge islands, new median landscaping, ADA accessible pedestrian ramps. From 26th Street to 29th Street, we are maintaining the dedicated bus lanes that we installed in 2018, reconstructing the existing medians with landscaping, installing new ADA accessible median bus stop at 26th Street, creating sidewalk extensions for safer crossing distances, and additional pedestrian refuge islands and new medians. From 29th Street to Avenue N, we are adding new ADA accessible median bus stops, maintaining the dedicated bus lanes, reconstructing the existing medians with landscaping, creating additional refuge islands on the new medians. And now Nick can dive into the landscaping plan.
Al, can you hear me okay? Yes,
Yes,
awesome.
if you can speak up a little bit, that'd be great.
Sure, I will try to get closer to the mic here. My name is Nick Petnati. I'm Deputy Director of Urban Design here at DOT and a landscape architect by profession. So excited to be here to sort of walk you through the opportunities we have with the landscaped areas in the medians. In this presentation, we just have a sample block from Kings Highway. It's actually just outside of your district, but it does illustrate sort of our goals. As a general sort of approach here, we're really excited to basically take an opportunity to raise the medians from their sort of current decrepit and dilapidated date. There'll be where we're going, and then it'll be a standard curb height reveal at the intersections to still allow smooth crossing for pedestrians. And that raised area really gives us a great opportunity to install understory plantings and trees that will provide year-round interest, obviously increase the amount of pervious surface to capture stormwater, and the sort of knock-on environmental and ecological and social benefits that we get with plantings, in addition to the safety benefits that we see when we're able to include understory plantings in our projects. They do serve to visually narrow the roadway and generally cause drivers to pay a little bit closer attention. So there's a multitude of benefits that we are able to achieve by including plantings here. So if you go to the next slide, this is obviously just a general existing condition showing the different median conditions. This gives you a sample of what we're looking at. So the orange area that's highlighted is essentially the existing median that will be reconstructed. Obviously, all of the safety benefits and safety improvements that Dustin pointed to. And then in that orange area, we've worked with the Parks Department and our design team to make sure we can maximize the amount of new trees that are being included, as well as include full understory plantings with a variety of understory plants that will provide year-round ornamental interest. And so if you go to the next slide, we should have, I think, a focus. This is the focus on trees. This is to give you a sense of the cross section and how this is being built, right? So again, that middle area, we're really trying to take advantage of, build out, provide the space for new bus waiting areas, of course, and then the landscape spaces where there aren't people using the buses. The next slide, I think we focus in on the proposed trees. So here's just, again, a close-up giving you a sense of what the sort of prototypical tree planting would look like. These are the various species that we're including. As with all of our projects, we work very closely with the Parks Department to ensure that there's a variety of tree species so that guards against, any potential issue with disease in the future. We don't want to plant just one type of tree and then a fungus or a pest comes through and wipes that out. So we do look at a variety of trees and really trying to get trees that provide the sort of biggest canopy possible. So we really eke out as many of those environmental benefits as possible. And then the next slide will focus in on the sort of typical understory planting layout. And I realize these graphics aren't the greatest, but the idea here is we're going to be doing a swath of understory plantings of different varieties to introduce color, variety and texture. All of the plants are really selected to be very hardy, tough plants that we know will survive in this very tough growing environment. We've done this now at a number of different projects through our Vision Zero Great Streets capital projects, as well as other bus priority projects. Atlantic Avenue was recently built, for example. We've done Webster Avenue up in the Bronx, as well as Grand Concourse. So we've got a number of these under our belt. We have a good sense of what that palette looks like and what we know will survive. And we really are trying to focus on as many native plants as we possibly can, looking at plants that support pollinator species, while at the same time not creating a huge maintenance burden. Our goal is to make sure that these things are going to look great and look great year round. So if you go to the next slide, you'll get a sense of some of the plants that we're talking about here. So again, a variety of colors and textures, but really stuff that we know is going to be hardy and provide that year-round interest. And so we're excited to be able to do this. This is an area that will be maintained by DOT. We have a landscape maintenance program that focuses on our Vision Zero priority projects, as well as our priority bus corridors. It's an effort where we really try to deliver maintenance services in areas of the city that otherwise wouldn't be able to get it because they don't have a partner or a bid or a community organization that can step up and do this kind of work. So we're excited to be able to use it along this corridor and really green up a big stretch of Kings Highway. Happy to obviously answer any questions as well, but want to be respectful of time.
Great, thanks, Nick. And then last slide, just moving on to project timeline. We're currently in finalizing. We're in the latest stages of design. We are preparing to put this out to bid for construction within the next few months, and then hopefully start construction later at the end of this year. This is as you saw from the project scope, this spans big stretch of Kings Highway, but also Flatlands and Pennsylvania Avenue. So for the entire scope of the project, we estimate a 2028 completion year for construction. And that's it for the presentation. I want to open up to discussions. One thing to note is that we are submitting this for PDC review and approval for the landscaping plan. So we're hoping to get a letter of approval from you all. And so far we've obtained one from CB14 following our presentation to them last month.
Thank you for that presentation, Dustin, Joe, and Nick. So we'll I see a bunch of hands up. So we'll start with community board members, and then we'll open up to the rest of the public. So acknowledging my co-chair, Steve. Shane, do you have a question?
Just real quick, I was just curious about the 2028 date for estimated completion. Any idea between late 2023 and 2028, ballpark even, like when in that span the section that's in our community district might be completed? Thanks.
Yeah, so we have Fahad here, who's our liaison with our Department of Design and Construction, who will be managing the construction efforts. Fahad, could you speak to sort of the construction timeline of that? Fahad, are you on the line? I think you're on mute. Okay, well, I don't know if he's on, but so basically this would be figured out in the construction bid. We obviously would try to minimize. We would have a phased approach, section by section for this.
And I'll just add, typically DDC will come back and obviously present that construction schedule to the community board once the contractor is on and has a plan for when that work is going to take place. So you'll have that touch point as well.
Great, thank you. Sean?
Thanks. Quickly, I want to make sure that you've reached out to Brooklyn Community Hospital, also Maimonides Hospital now, because I remember they were flabbergasted that they were not an express stop in the 2017-2018 changes. If not, I'm happy to facilitate an introduction to Barry Stern, the president of the hospital.
Yeah, we're more than happy to speak with them. I know the majority of the outreach was done leading up to the SPS launch, and these are just construction updates for the last phase of this effort, but we're more than happy to take additional feedback. And if there's anything, in terms of additional bus stops, as you all know, we have MTA here who can discuss bus routing as part of the Brooklyn redesign as well.
Okay, thanks. I'm happy to facilitate. I'll make those introductions tomorrow. Also, Nick, I think my brain blinked when you were talking about the maintenance of the plantings on Kings Highway. Our district in general and Kings Highway certainly could use a lot of green love, but I am concerned about maintenance because we have had issues with DOT and maintenance on medians before. So will you repeat how that's going to happen?
Yeah, sure. Happy to, and understand the confusion, because we haven't had a landscape maintenance program in the past. This is a fairly recent development at the agency in context of our Vision Zero projects over the last 5 to 8 years, as well as some of the big bus projects that we're talking about. So the agency does have a small pot of funding that we're able to use, and we have a contractor on board for the entire borough of Brooklyn. And so as part of that effort, once this project is built, the initial maintenance will be done by DDC as part of their landscape contract. That's typical of construction projects. There's usually a guarantee period, that kind of a thing. And then as that ends, we will phase it into our maintenance program and have our maintenance contractor then begin doing regular visits. We typically will visit a site a minimum of once a week. and then obviously increased frequency during the summer months when the plants need sort of the most attention, and decreased frequency during the winter months when they are dormant, for example. So that's the basic gist.
But then the maintenance is just for the plantings. It's to care for what is planted. It's not, doesn't include maintenance of, say, litter that is caught in the plantings. It's not a cleaning maintenance. It's only a planting maintenance.
No, the litter piece will also be included.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. That doesn't slow
anything
down
within the planted areas, they will address. Yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yep. No problem.
Thank you. Moving right along, Glenn, go ahead.
Thank you. Early in the presentation, you talked about the B82 to the SBS line and how it improved speeds by 24%, which tells us pretty much nothing. 50 mile an hour, 24% gets you to 62 miles an hour, which is quite nice, 12 mile an hour improvement. But if we're talking about 5 miles an hour to 6.2 miles per hour, that's pretty insignificant. So I'd like to get a better idea of what we're actually talking about here. Anybody?
I don't have the exact speed numbers right in front of me here, but it was obviously not in the 60 mile per hour range. I don't have that information right in front of me right now. But we were comparing the SBS to the local route in that. So it wasn't being compared to the previous route or anything like that. It's just comparing what the local is doing on the local B82 is doing now compared to the SBS. I could get the speed numbers into you tomorrow if you want. I just don't have them in front of me because I'm not at my desk right now at work.
Okay, thank you.
So that would be great.
Sure.
Moving right along, Liz.
Sorry. I think that, this project sounds really good to, beautify the space, to make a lot of pedestrian safety improvements. I just wanted to note that the presenter suggested we could write a letter in support. And I certainly think that would be an appropriate thing for our committee to do if that's something we're interested in. Like, I would be interested in supporting such a letter. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Great. I'm not seeing any other hands from the public. Sorry, Fahad.
Yeah, sorry, Dustin referred to me earlier and I had audio issues. So yeah, as Nick mentioned, that's something, the schedule question that came up as where it's going to fit in that timeline. That's something that's worked out once we have the contractor on board. So it's, and definitely as Nick mentioned, will DDC at that point before the project even starts, way before that, they're going to reach out to the CB and inform of the actual start date and how the scheduling is going to be done, how the maintenance protection of traffic is going to happen. So they'll definitely reach out at that point with the more finer details of the schedule and implications, traffic, and the closures, everything is going to be worked out at that time. Right. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that, Fahad. Not seeing any other hands. So my understanding is that Dustin is requesting a letter of support from Community Board 14. Steve, if you would help me out, I'm not recalling the protocols as far as so this is something that we'll take I guess a vote on or to propose to the full board.
I think we basically need unanimous consent, right, to move forward with it.
Yeah, Steve, you need unanimous consent to bring it forward to the full board on Monday night for ratification, and then it can be submitted to does it go to DOT or MTA? All of the above?
DOT, it would come to us. Yeah, thank you.
And I'm happy to help draft that. So, and maybe even have it prepared in advance of the Monday meeting, so a draft can be sent to them in advance for review. So when you present it, people have a sense.
That'd be great.
Great. Are there of the board members present? Are there any concerns with the plans that are shared with us tonight? Yays, nays.
Yeah, yays. You think most of us?
So I can assume that it's unanimous. So we will move forward and propose this to the full board on Monday. I don't think we have any other items, any new business or any other old business that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, we can proceed with adjourning. Thank you, Dustin, Nick, and Joe for staying and hanging on with your presentation as well. So we will adjourn the CB14 Transportation Committee meeting at 8:18. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you at the full board. Thanks.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night.
Very,
so
very
much,
good
all.
presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the presentations. Have a good night.